Hello students, this is the second part of our Unit 4 of Strategic Management and Business Policy. In the first part, I had given you regarding the concepts, types, components and importance of our business corporate strategy. Now in the second part, we will study about the strategic formulation, strategic evaluation, etc. Before going on to the strategic formulation, let us study this particular chart. Starting from the top left corner, we have environmental scanning. Then next on the right of it is the strategy formulation. Later on the third side is the strategy implementation. And then we have the evaluation and control of the strategy. Now let us go one by one. Environmental scanning, external. As I have already mentioned to you, give the opportunities and threats. In that, the external factor, natural, social tasks, we will be studying these in later. Then internal scanning, primarily give you the strengths and weaknesses, that is the structure, culture and resources. Now coming to the second part, that is the strategy formulation. In that there are four things: mission, objectives, strategies and policies. Then strategy implementation, programs, budgets, procedures, and evaluation comes the performance and actual performance. So now we go on to the strategy formulation. Strategy formulation concept. As a concept, strategy formulation is an analytical process of selection of the best suitable course of action to meet the organizational objectives. So basically you analyze and then choose the best course of action made to meet the objectives and vision of the organization. Then through strategic planning, an organization caters for the resources, establishes the most suitable course of action by examining internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats to formulate the strategy. As we have seen in the previous diagram, before the strategy formulation was the environmental analysis, where we had the internal and external value. Now, as far as the next part is the levels of strategy, which we have already studied earlier. So there are four levels as I mentioned you, but here we will be considering the three levels, that is the corporate level strategy, business level strategy, functional level strategy. Why are we doing that? Because strategy formulation will apply to all the three levels of, that is the corporate, business or functional level. Let's see what do we do in the strategy formulation for each of these. In the levels of strategy formulation, corporate level strategy, this will outline what is required to be achieved through the type of strategy that we have studied: stability, expansion, retrenchment or combination strategies. And as far as the next comes the business level strategy, to decide how the businesses are going to compete, where each is considered as a strategic business unit. Each of the corporate have got various businesses, like in the respective business there are other people also, and how it is going to compete. For example, Tata Consultancy Service, how is it going to compete with the Infosys, with the HCL, etc. and all that. Then comes the third one, that is the functional level strategy. This concentrates on how the organization is going to grow. It defines daily action to deliver corporate and business level strategy, because each of business level strategy will have various functional areas, and in those functional areas what is to be done to support the business, and correspondingly from the business to the corporate also. So having seen the levels of strategy, and we already know strategy formulation process. Now in the strategy formulation process, first thing, as we have seen those four things that in the previous diagram, that establishing organization objectives. We will see each of these things. First let us go to the steps. Then analysis of organizational environment. As we have studied in the definition, is the analysis. Organizational environment, that both internal and external. Forming quantitative goals which we can verify. Objectives in context with the divisional plan or the departmental plans, because departments make a particular organization and each of the department will have its objective. Then the performance analysis, and then strategy selection. Strategy selection, that is the type of strategy that we are going to say, that is the 4 types of strategies that we have studied. That is the stability, expansion, retrenchment, or combination of this. Let us see each of these particular components of the strategy formulation process. First was the establishing of organization objectives. This will involve both long-term goals of an organization. Based on those long-term goals, strategic decision can be taken once the organization objectives are determined. So first we have to have organization objective, then this. The next point was analysis of the organization environment. This will involve SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities and threat analysis. A successful organization builds on its strength, overcomes its weaknesses, identifies opportunities and protects against the threats. Fundamental point of this in the organizational environment analysis. The next point is the third, forming a quantitative goals. That is defining targets so as to meet the company's short-term and long-term objectives. Say 30% increase in revenue this year. So both the things as you see in this is what is to be achieved and in what time frame it is to be achieved. The fourth step was the objectives in context with the divisional plans. It will involve setting up targets for every department so that they work in coherence with the organization. For example, Department of Finance, production, marketing, etc. So production should be so as it will be consumed in the market. The target of the marketing will be set depending upon the production, and production will be depending upon how much we are able to sell. And for both these things, the finances, etc. This is just an example. Then next comes the performance analysis, as the name suggests, to estimate the degree of variation between the actual and the standard performance of an organization. So that is analysis whether that particular thing is successful or not, and then selection of the strategy, that is involve evaluation of the alternatives and selection of the best course of action. That is when there is number of opportunities are available, which one to go for. Say expansion, we have studied number of types of expansion strategy, concentration or diversification, or we had internalization or global, etc. Having studied this, now let us go on to the factors which will be affecting the strategy formulation. So first factor is the environmental factors, as we have studied in the diagram also. Environmental factors, primarily external environment, which will give us the opportunities and threats. In the external environment, we have seen there are three types, that is the natural environment, resources and climate. For example, resources in terms of natural resources like oil, vegetation, or the various other flora and fauna, etc. and all that, mines, etc. And the climatic condition which is suitable for a particular type of industry also. The social environment, forces in the society, what is the requirement of the society, what is the society looking for. The third one is the task environment, because another way, what is the industry like, whether the industry is growing or not growing also, or is stabilized also, what is the industry performance, like for example, pharma industry, IT industry is doing very well, but whereas some of the manufacturing industry may not be doing so well. Then we come to the internal environment, which gives us the strengths and weaknesses. In that also we had studied three things. Structure. Structure gives the various, the type of structure that we have, that's the organization chart, and the chain of command in that. Who reports to whom and who is responsible for whom, and the system, how it works. So in a structure always you will have the chain of command, and which will define as to the tall structure or the flat structure, and who reports to whom, and then who is responsible to whom, and thereafter we have as the system of working in that always. Then the culture, work culture, beliefs, expectations and values. The third is the resources. These are the resources both in terms of our assets, skills, competencies and knowledge. Knowledge of the people, skills of the people, competencies of the people, and the natural assets or financial assets or the various unmovable or unmovable assets. So having seen the factors, number one, that is the environmental factors, let us see the other factors. The second factor that we are going to consider is the mission. As we had seen under the heading of strategy formulation, first thing was the mission. Mission states reason for existing of the organization. That is, why are we in that particular business and what are we to do about it. The next point was the objectives. What results are to be accomplished and by when. So these two things are important. What results and by when. The third is the strategy. To achieve those results, what are the plans to achieve the mission and the objective. And then the program, policies, broad guidelines for decision making. So these are 5 factors that are there. Then 6th is, after that, feedback and learning, so that we can make a correction as and when needed for that. Strategy evaluation. After having seen the strategy formulation, now we go to the strategy evaluation. Strategy evaluation, a process. It is the process of determining the effectiveness of a given strategy. That is the strategy that we have chosen to implement, maybe any of the strategy that we have studied, whether it is stability, expansion, retrenchment, or combination of them, in achieving the organization objectives and taking corrective actions wherever required to keep the organization on the right track. So 2 things which are important is that what the objectives are and what the effectiveness of the strategy, and if they it's not been effective, what is the correction action that are required to be taken. Then the next portion is regarding the how we show the process of strategy evaluation. So there will be 4 steps in that. First of all, against what we want to evaluate our strategy. Say fixing the benchmark of performance. So people know as to against what performance measures their performance will be done or the organization evaluation will be done. So first is the organization can use both quantitative and qualitative criteria for assessment. What is quantitative criteria? This includes examples: net profit, return on investment, earning per share, cost of production, rate of employee turnover. Then qualitative criteria could be skills and competencies, risk-taking, potential, and flexibility. So the first process, having studied the fixing the benchmark for performance, let's see the second step. The second step is measurement of performance. Now financial statements, balance sheets, profit and loss accounts are prepared on annual basis to measure the performance. So naturally, after we have measured the performance, the next step obviously should be analyzing the variance. That is what the benchmark was and what we have actually performed. That is the analysis. The degree of tolerance limits of variance between actual and standard performance that are acceptable is specified. Then the next portion will be, after analysis, when there is a variation, what to do? Taking the corrective action. Taking the corrective action, if variation is beyond acceptable limits, corrective action must be taken. And if the variation in performance is very high and within beyond the acceptable limits, then is consistently bad, that desired performance, then the factors responsible will have to be studied and identified and studied in detail. Then strategy evaluation criteria. Now all these 4 steps that we are criteria, one are the consistency. That strategy should be consistent with the internal aspects of the organization. That is our strength and weaknesses, etc. And it should be consistent. So second point is consonance, basically external. That is, the strategy should be in agreement with the external trends in the environment. Say a particular industry of ours is growing at 10%, but the industry in totality is growing at 15%, so we are less. But we should also grow more than that. That is consonance. The next is the feasibility. That the strategy should be really reasonable in terms of organization resources like money and capital management and professional and technical resources at that time. And the last one, competitive advantage. The strategy should be maintain a competitive advantage in terms of resources, skill and position. Thank you. Now next we will be studying in the environment analysis. That I will be taking it in the next part.